Great.
Okay.
So on behalf of the South African TA Association, I welcome you to the webinar with Giles Barrow. Giles, it's lovely to have you engaging with us again. You've really been one of our ancestors in the educational TA field. I think I always think of Jean Clark as the kind of spark way back, and then kind of you and Trudy have just kept along, writing articles, keeping it alive, editing a book about educational TA, and really moving into exciting new aspects of bringing in eco-TA as well. And at the heart of it, I've always known you as someone who wants education to be impactful and accessible. I've enjoyed your rebelliousness of changing things. It's given me a lot of permission to do it my own way. So I'm thinking of your CAP and the keynote you did in San Francisco in an open neck shirt with a flip chart. That was so exciting. And some men in suits and ties afterwards sort of went brum, 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 brum. But that is just you, Giles. You bring your fullness to everything you do, and your thinking about how we do what we do, I really enjoy. So looking forward to another encounter with you in our international group, but on behalf of the SATA, you're very welcome.
Hey, thank you very much, Karen. It's lovely to be working with you again, twice in a summer. Fancy that, must be a good year. I'm really pleased to be joining you again, Karen, and the groups that you bring together. Thank you for that. And yeah, think fondly of you so far away, but busy on themes which really touch into my own. So I feel great resonance, Karen, as you know. And as people are gathering here today, you know, I recognise a few faces, and you know, it kind of warms me as I recognise, and also I'm interested in meeting new folks that perhaps haven't bumped into me before. I think with the format of today, I think doing an extended check-in probably isn't probably particularly helpful, but I do want to give us an opportunity just to arrive and connect with our process today. We've just got a couple of hours, and yeah, I'll perhaps give some ideas about how I see the session, but I am also interested in just getting a sense from yourselves as to, you know, anything particularly that you're bringing, any questions that you think are pertinent, or indeed anything you just want to ask of me to get yourself connected. So not so much a kind of formal check-in, but just a way of making contact is what I had in mind. Perhaps it would be helpful if I just said at the beginning how I envisage the couple of hours that we've got. The theme is education as encounter, and what I'm really looking to create and cultivate is a discussion around some material that I'll talk to. And I want to emphasize, and those of you that have worked with me before will perhaps be familiar with the idea is I do prefer dialogue and discussion. So I don't have a PowerPoint here. In fact, it'll probably be very much a discussion as we're having here. And just to be very clear, there isn't a special time to sort of ask questions. I'm going to ask you to just butt in, to interrupt this. An interruption will become an important theme here. So feel free to interrupt, use the chat room if need be, or just start waving your arms or something. If there's a comment or a question or a clarity or connection of some sort. Because what I'm wanting to do is cultivate a period of time, some discussion in which you make your own mind up. This is one of those sessions where remaining silent throughout, nodding passively, agreeing is going to be kind of missing the point of the 2 hours. So kind of interrupt me, interrupt yourself in order to make your own decisions around this stuff that we'll be sharing. I think it might be helpful to have a short breakout, one breakout at some point to lead into the material, and maybe something towards the end just to reflect in breakout rooms. but otherwise I think we'll be staying as a large group. So that's what I have in mind. In terms of source material, the main frame of the 2 hours is based on an article that I wrote that came out just in, I think it's the current or the previous TAJ on education as encounter. So that's kind of the main source for this. But in addition to that, there's I think I'm going to end up mentioning Parker J. Palmer, and there's a fact sheet on Palmer's work on my own website, which I'll pop in the chat room, the link for that, if you haven't already got it. But really, those are the two bits of paper if you want to get an anchor into the material itself. I think, you know, coming back to Karen, my comment to Karen and the resonance with her work, for those of you who've been working with Karen, you know, you might start to pick up quite a strong link between, you know, what Karen's been writing about in terms of being an educator with the idea of education and encounter. So that's it's kind of a little heads up as to how I see it connecting with material that some of you may have looked at. But enough. I'm interested at this stage. Anyone got any questions about me? Maybe those people who don't really know me, you want to kind of just kind of anchor yourself with me, or indeed those that do know me and you have a question, maybe why you've come along today. But yeah, if there's anybody who wants to pitch in at this point, I'd appreciate that. That's very polite. Now, if anyone wants to, thanks, Diane.
Giles, I am reflecting with great pleasure on our workshop in Raleigh.
Oh my God. Oh,
that was an encounter of note. And I'm looking forward to an encounter today. I'm open to what comes.
Yeah, so the reason why I'm laughing is that I'm immediately reminded of quite a, I don't know what the word is, but it was a workshop with Diane, and we explored homonymy, and it was that was a hell of a ride working with Diane.
Likewise.
And immediately my heart sings when I think of that afternoon, and quite a that is going to link, I think, at some point with encounter. Actually, yeah, I'll come back to that. That's lovely. Thank you, Diane. Thank you. Thanks for that. Yeah. Anybody else who wants to come in? You can reminisce if you want. Yeah, but anything that you want to just check out at this stage. Yeah. Thanks, Dragana.
Hi. I'm always curious what happened in a group process. And I'm always have some kind of anxiety when I start in new groups, what will happen. And for me, it's really challenging to settle up myself in a group field. And I'm very curious to know how we can prepare ourselves to look at some points at the beginning, to pick up the adults in this educational process, not to work with other adaptive position or something else. You know, for me, it's really challenging because our culture is very traditional, and position with trainees is always something like at the beginning is plus minus, you know. And I'm very curious to know what's happened in this group process. And you put a lot of points, and I'm willing to deal with this. and curiosity with this process.
Okay, and Dragana, is there anything particularly that would support you in getting into that settled place? Anything you want to know from me?
Yes, maybe about the thinking about the beginning in the process of development of the group. What's happening in this beginning process, how we can settle or structure the things in the beginning, like to give some inputs for curiosity, because I read a lot of your articles, and I saw a lot of philosophical moments that I really, maybe some I understand, but something I didn't understood. But I'm really, it will be helpful to share some ideas or how to support this creativity and beginning in the process of the development of the group.
Okay. Well, I know right now that I have some apprehension because there's people that I'm seeing here, and immediately you could hear the connection with Karen and Diane. I'm thinking, oh, great, I've got that connection. There's something kind of familiar, and then there's, oh, thank goodness for that. Yourself, Dragana, I'm thinking, will she like me? Will she understand what it is I've got to say? Will I understand her, and so on? And I'm just finding that to ignore the child anxiety and apprehension isn't always helpful for me. So I kind of welcome it and make sense of it, which is why I'm inviting the questions from yourselves at the moment, because I hope it's a light-hearted way into inviting us into creating something that's good enough then to get into conversation with. So that's certainly something I'm doing right now, Dragon, to manage my own uncertainty. Away too quickly. I don't want to get too kind of familiar or comfortable here just yet. So I'm interested to see who else wants to kind of raise something or check something out.
I'll go.
Thanks, Alex.
So the registration process for the webinar did not work out as I'd hoped. It's left me feeling in performance mode. There's another person who's just managed to arrive. So still trying to sort out people who registered but didn't get the notice. So in two minds, trying to keep track of what's happening in the webinar and at the same time darting between emails and WhatsApp and the website to sort that out. It's been quite difficult. It's so interesting because every time Di and I are in the same room, she reminds me of my days as a pilot, kind of putting aside the emotional and somatic responses to stress and being able to stay focused. So it's just another reminder of my ability to do that now. Thanks, Di. It's been useful because I can still tune in with what's happening outside of my head, so in my emotions, in my body. So thanks for that reminder. Okay. Yeah, that's what's been going on for me.
Okay, Alex, and so I get a sense, to use the metaphor, Alex, I get a sense that you're still circling and waiting to land. Do that, because that's kind of important in terms of the stability of the group. So I appreciate you taking the responsibility on our behalf on that. And so if we notice that you're a bit distant, it's because you're doing what you need to do for now. But then maybe suddenly you'll kind of, ta-da, you'll be here.
I think everyone is in the room now who's supposed to be. So the main landing gear has touched the runway.
Thank you. Okay, so anybody else who's got a question about the session or something they just need to just mention in order to settle here? Yeah, Kirsty, thanks.
Sorry, Arvind, do you want to go? I've seen you raise your hand twice and I just did it over you again.
Okay, thank you. Giles, when you're talking about what I'm actually more a reflection for me more than a question is education as an encounter shows me it's a moment-to-moment space that I'm with the other person. So learning can happen and the learning environment can happen anywhere if there's a agreement for it. And it doesn't need to be what it is when I think about it as an encounter, it's moving away from a particular time-based session or number of sessions, and it's just making it into an open space for me. And that's what I'm coming in wondering about education as an encounter.
Okay, and I think you're picking up on a quality that I want to speak about later. One thing I'll just say at this stage is you said something about where it can be agreed, something like that. I'm going to suggest that, and it may become clearer later, that encounter is something that is not possible to contract for.
Okay, that's even better for me to hear that. Okay.
Yeah, and that's going to be especially important because you also use the word learning, and I'm going to get quite particular with my language a bit later. And I don't know, and this is going to sound a bit kind of out there at the moment. I don't know, let's see how it goes. But I'm talking here about education as encounter. I'm still not convinced that that's got much to do with learning. I'll just throw that in there. That's all I'm saying. We'll come back to that. Go on, Kirsty, because you were cutting in over. I've ended now cutting across you. Kirsty, go on. Where
Hi everyone. Hi Giles. So I'm here because I try to do all the SATA webinars, and also, to be honest, I didn't even see what the topic was. I was just like, Giles, Barrow, cool, I'm interested, sign up. But having now looked at what the topic is, I'm starting a webinar series from Monday for the next 5 weeks that I'm hosting. And it's the first time I'm running webinars for people that are not part of the TA community. So they're not probably used to experiencing learning in the same way that we all are. But I plan to show up in the way that I would as I would with you guys. So it's a very different way of learning. So I'm just interested to inform myself. Notice me discounting myself there. I'm interested to inform myself into how to show up, but take care of the fact that they're going to be completely new to this style of learning. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what comes out of this.
Okay, thanks, Kirsty. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I think there's something kind of really attractive about working with people that don't know a great deal about TA, particularly if TA then becomes part of the content of it. So I find it a real privilege doing TA 101s, running TA 101s, absolute privilege to be the one that kind of introduces the ego state or the transactions or to see what happens next. Thanks. Okay, anybody else out there with it? Yeah, go on, Nisha. Good to see you again.
Hi, Giles. Hi, everyone. So the word association I made with encounter was the Indian context. So very often what happens here is if there's a criminal who typically through the justice system may not get his due diligence, the police does what is called an encounter, where, they say that he escaped from custody and, the police had no choice, or he attacked the police and so they had to sort of shoot him down. But it ends up being that, they don't go through the justice system. And that was my word association with encounter. So I'm curious to know, how does it pan out here in the education framework? I haven't read your article and I haven't mulled over it much, but that's the sort of thinking or question or curiosity I'm sitting with here.
Can I just check, Nisha, when you then, so is the use of the word encounter to describe something that's outside of the law?
It happens that way, but it's not meant to be outside of the law. It's, and when Arvind spoke about an agreement and you countered that and you said it's not an agreement, it immediately struck me as, that's exactly what the police does here. It's not an agreement. It's staged. Basically, it's staged.
Right. Okay. I'm intrigued by that use of the word. Yeah. Okay. We're kind of already getting into this. We're already into the territory. So I'm tempted to just sort of start to swim out into the ocean of it all, but any remaining questions that you have of myself or working together or material?
Morning. I'm Denise and glad to be here, and sorry I'm late. I don't have a question, but I'm full of curiosity. Everything that you've described that I've heard so far is an invitation. So I'm really excited to learn more about this concept of education as encounter. So yes, I'm happy to swim. Thanks.
Okay, maybe, yeah, if I just start to then get into the material, what I'm going to do, rather than launch straight into talking about encounter, is to pull back a bit and put this theme into some broader context. And what I'm going to do is start with a reference to Parker Palmer. If you haven't come across the work of Parker Palmer, and you're interested in, if you like, teaching as a vocation, then I'd really recommend that you have a look at his work. His key work for educators is The Courage to Teach. The Courage to Teach. And the subtitle of that is Exploring the Inner Landscape of the Teacher. And what Palmer observes is that often when you get a group of educators together, the most common thing they tend to talk about is what do you teach? And that's often in relation to a subject or groups of students and so on. And then often it gets into the how do you teach, which refers to methodology and techniques and resources and so on and so forth. And he points out that these are really the very, they're the kind of the bread and butter of teachers' discussions. He points out that it's less common for educators to engage in the question of why do you teach? And then finally, rarely do we ask ourselves, and who is the teacher? And for whom is the teacher? And Palmer's view is that this is a shame that within teacher education, these questions about the why, and perhaps even more importantly, the who, are often overlooked. And we rush to talk about the what and the how. And the reason he is disappointed with that, and it's something which perhaps many of us will share, is that the experience of education is about the people showing up in it. In other words, he talks about how we teach out of who we are. And as I hope we get to a little later, is that when we are the one that is being educated, what we are most mindful of, what we are most experiencing is someone, not their technique, nor their subject, but someone. And so Palmer's work is quite useful in the context of this seminar, because much of that Courage to Teach book is all about investigating the who is the teacher. In TA terms, and certainly for those people involved in the training with myself, the kind of longer term educational training, much of the time is spent deconstructing, exploring, becoming friends with the story I've told myself about education, about being an educator, about being a student. That not until I've really excavated that internal experience, if you like, my script, can I know who shows up in the educational task. And it could be worth my while finding that out, because whether I know it or not, it's certainly what the student experiences. And so Palmer's work is all about, it's a non-TA, I hasten to add, a non-TA approach to excavating and exploring the internal, if you like, layers as to who I am as an educator. And what that does for me is start to raise a question about how how does education exist? When we imagine education, what shape does it take? And you could say that this is like an existential question, is how does education exist? This is obviously quite a long way away from what to do in the classroom or in the training room when somebody's behaving in a certain way. This is much less about doing education, and it touches on Karen's work, which is about being an educator. So that's the territory we're in for this morning. It may well be though that you start to make your own mind up as to what implications this might have for you as an educator in whatever context you're working. So I just want to remind you, there is no special time for questions. Just pitch in, do your kind of wave on the little animation things or what have you. And I will keep an eye on the chat room now and then. And I am wondering whether or not, now we're kind of gathered, whether or not a brief breakout room experience might be useful. I know that means Alex now has to get back on the runway and start to figure out breakout rooms. I'm just wondering whether or not this works well in pairs. 6, 8, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 we've got. So we're going to be odd numbers anyway, I think, unless one of us comes out. This can be pairs or threes. Probably pairs is a good way of doing it, Alex.
Sorry, Jill, Justina here. I need to leave at 10, so I most likely will not be able to participate in the exercise.
Okay, well that's just okay. So so if Justina goes in as a 3, then she can pull out. Because what I'm going to be asking is for you to consider someone in the past who's been in an educator position that made impact, and it could be when you were at school, and it could be as in your junior school or primary school, however you refer to it in your country. It could be in your secondary experience. For some of us, it will be in college. For some of us, it be in our TA training. But I'm asking you to just conjure up in your mind that teacher, that trainer, that educator. And I'm going to invite you to be talking with your colleague about this. And I want you to spend some time considering what the qualities, maybe the expertise, but the behavior, to give something of the presence of that educator. But I then have a second question for you, which is what appeared out of you in that relationship, in that exchange? Now that it could have been just a one-off exchange. It could have been a period of time in which you were with that educator. But there are two parts to this. There's the what did you notice and experience from them, but what appeared in yourself. It's really important that you don't forget or discount or minimize that second piece. What showed up in yourself? If you've got the opportunity to, if there's a bit of time, then I'd like you to get into thinking about how has that stayed with you? How does that show up nowadays in your role as a trainer or teacher, or indeed when you're in the role of student? How does that reappear? So I just remind you that. So it's thinking about a significant educator. What was it about their presence, their quality? What showed up in you? And then how has that stayed with you, or in what way does it? Let's have a look at the time. I was going to give about, Alex, can I just check, will we be in pairs?
Yeah, so Zoom is doing it 2 to 3 participants per room.
Okay.
I think that might include you, Giles.
Okay.
But we can move back to the main room. If there's an issue or a boundary issue, then I can just come back to the main room. I'll put you into a new room.
I was going to say, if we could just take 15 minutes on this.
15.
And
right.
What I'm going to ask you to do, if you can be disciplined about this, what's helpful is if when someone's talking, just give them 5 minutes. So if you're in a 3, just give them 5 minutes just to talk. You don't need to get into a conversation about this. Just witness how that person accounts for the teacher, accounts for themselves, accounts for how that shows up. Just 5 minutes, and then move on to the next person. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So given that all the groups are fine, we'll be back here at just 5 to 10. Alex, if you can give us the minutes warning. Yeah?
Yeah, there'll be a 2-minute warning.
Okay, thank you. Let's do this thing. Lovely. I don't know about yourselves, but I felt in our little trio, we got into a couple of really delightful little stories that became quite both personal very quickly and also very specific very quickly. I don't want to go round and ask people to report in that those stories stay within your groups. But I just wonder, how often do you spend reflecting on those kind of encounters, those kind of exchanges? Is that, maybe that's the first time for some of you thinking about? Okay. I notice in TA generally that when we tend to look back at influences, we tend to go back to parents. Although Byrne talked about parental figures, the tendency is to talk about mums and dads, or maybe another key family member. But maybe that little exercise there just touches into how significant educators can be. And certainly, as I say, in my work in preparing people in educational TA, spend a lot more time thinking about the teachers that have appeared. And I know that there will be those that felt quite benevolent and supportive, as well as the monsters, the ogres as well. But we'll come back to that experience just a little later, but I want to resist talking too much of encounter right now, and instead talk about how commonly education tends to exist in our imagination. And I'm going to refer to process or product orientated education. And I'm going to talk about that because in my observation, it is the most predominant way in which we think about education. And I would say pretty much across most parts of the world and in most communities, but not all. And what I'm meaning here is that education exists primarily as a process, and that process has a beginning, middle, and an end, and that it has an outcome, an intended outcome, and that those outcomes can be described and defined in all sorts of ways. They can be about the acquisition of knowledge, the capacity to perform skills. They can also be about, and this is where it gets a bit kind of interesting, it can also be, the outcome be about personal growth. That I will realize my potential at the end of all of this. But it can also at the more radical end, be about the outcome is societal change. So most educational philosophy and theory frames the business of education as being somehow product orientated, in which you have a point A and move into point B. And that point B is always better than point A. That you are ignorant at the front end but you'll be clever at the other end. You're incompetent at the front end, you will be competent at the other end. You are, in some sense, immature at this end, but you will be mature at the other. We are oppressed at this end, but we will be free at the other end. You get my drift? There is a trajectory, okay, which is like an arc. One end is inferior than the other. The other thing is that the educator is positioned within this trajectory as in different ways. It could be the guide. It can be the kind of source of salvation, the rescuer, if you like, the person that's bringing freedom to the ignorant or knowledge to the ignorant. But the teacher is placed somewhat outside of the student experience. So there's another implication there. Okay. I'm suggesting that whilst this is really common and embedded in the way that we imagine education, I'm anxious, I have a certain concern that such a way of thinking about education can be very easily reduced, contracted down, and resulting in a very kind of unhealthy and distorted experience of education. And those distortions are about standardization, homogenization, and if you like, once it grips into a system, what happens is the objectification of the learner. And what I mean, but I do mean that, I don't mean simply that the learner becomes just data, but even in the personal growth model, the learner is somehow subject to what I, as the educator, believe is good for them. So somehow I will judge when they've matured, when they've developed. So I'm just going to pause for a moment and check out how you're doing with this, whether or not this kind of resonates, even though it's a bit abstract. I'm just wondering if it resonates, or if you want to come back with any challenge here or question. Thanks, Denise, for the thumbs up. Yeah. Anyone else here? Yeah, thank you.
I have a question, Giles. I'm thinking about, I think what is called developmental levels or stages. Marco Mazzetti talks about it in terms of supervisees. And on first thought, there seems to be some level of assessment by the supervisor required to categorize a supervisee into one of those levels. And I'm assuming that it's easier for the supervisor or a teacher to do that because presumably the supervisee or the student doesn't know what they don't know. So how is this, just stick with supervisor and supervisee, how does the supervisor still know that their supervisee is at a level of development and perhaps not know what's best for them? And there's some kind of conflagration there, isn't there?
I'm not too sure at the moment. I'm not too sure that I'm getting the...
Okay. So if you have a supervisee who's who the supervisor thinks is at a level of development, does that not automatically come with knowing what's better for them because the supervisor knows what the supervisee does not know?
Yes, I see. Yeah. And I'm suggesting that is typical of most educational models that we draw upon, is that the teacher on the whole tends to know best and knows better than, whether or not it's around personal growth or becoming a pilot. that there's a positioning of the student and the teacher.
Okay.
And yeah. Anybody else want to chip in here? Nisha, yeah.
I'm reminded of the learning goes really with the dogmatic or, you know, technological versus progressive or radical or humanistic. So, you know, a contrast between what sometimes is necessary and what can be. And I think how I'm feeling while you share this, Giles, is I think that's really the purpose of going through a TA education, you know, process, where I start to therefore look at what can be different, or how do we then move from, you know, progress ourselves as educators.
Right, Nisha. And I'm glad you raised the continuum. And for those that haven't come across this, the Learning Imagoes is a piece of work by Trudy Newton and Rosemary Napper. It's I feel it's a really central piece of material in which they look at different educational theory and talk about it in TA terms. If you haven't come across it, I really recommend it. It's in Tactics by Napper and Newton. There's a paper that I wrote on schooling, learning and script, in which I explore it as well. Now, the thing, you know, responding directly, Nisha, each one of those theories of education are still, if you like, product orientated, okay? And I'm talking about how some of them may appeal to us more than others. And for those of us involved in TA training, I know that we're often very aligned with humanistic education and the growth of the individual. It's worth remembering that each one of those particular models has a shadow side to them. There isn't a good one and a bad one. All of them can be done exceptionally well, and all of them can be done appallingly. And that, if you like, as Nisha's indicating there, I heard you indicate that what we might do is become more familiar with each one of those, a bit like each one is like a dance. And each one of those philosophies has a certain music to it, a certain costume to it, a certain move to it, a certain beat to it. And what we might do in our development as a TA educator is learn to dance the different tunes. What I'm talking about at the moment is a critique of all of them. And I'm saying that they all fit, if you like, within a common idea that education is about a process with a beginning, middle and the end has an outcome. And that outcome is usually already in the mind of the teacher. I'm going to go further though, and I'm going to suggest that in the West, and this is where I'll start to differentiate a little, in the West and in Western culture, there has been, if you like, a toxicity that has crept in to that product orientated idea of education, which has, I'm going to say in my view, a very anti-educational agenda. And my reason for suggesting that is that education becomes an extension of the economic model that it sits within. And so product becomes associated with the economic idea of product. And education becomes something that is easily commodified and standardized and regularized, and begins to, it's like it needs to start to look the same so it can be more easily transportable to different regions, different different markets and so on and so forth. That we get, if you like, a globalization of how education exists. And that kind of, it's like that global idea of education, it kind of, it gives the impression that it kind of belongs nowhere. And yet it comes out of a very particular idea or a very particular location, which is, as I say, a strongly marketized view of the world, which infects education. I realise I'm getting quite conceptual here and a little bit. Sorry, Di, is that a wave there, or are you just fanning yourself? I can't.
It's an interruption. You're ready for one.
Yeah.
And I'm really resonating with what you're saying, because one of my pet hates is outcomes-based education. Like when somebody says that, I go, because I think in a truly educational environment, you never know what the outcome can, would, or should be. And at the same time, I find myself with that. And then you say, and this applies to everything from personal growth to pilots. And then I go, oh, no. I want to know my pilot's been properly trained and has done all the service hours.
Yeah.
And is a good pilot like Alex. Otherwise, I'm not getting on the plane.
Right.
So how does that fit?
Thank you. So I'm going to draw on the work of a guy called Gert Biester. Gert Biester, he writes extensively around educational theory and philosophy. And what he does is he suggests that education can only exist because it has some kind of purpose. It's one of the human activities that is defined because it has a purpose. And he talks about 3 domains of educational purpose, one of which is that of qualification. And this really strikes at what you're saying here, Diane, is that one purpose of education is to, if you like, quality assure the broader, if you like, community that people have attended to understanding something about an aspect of the world in such a way that they are qualified in it. They are qualified to act in the world in some way. He talks about a second aspect, which is often what we might describe as the hidden curriculum, which is one of socialization. That I'm not simply learning how to be qualified in the world, but I'm also learning how to become socially adept in the world. I become socially, I become literate in the values, in the social conventions, and so on and so forth. He then, though, introduces a third domain, and he uses a particular word here, which is subjectification. And I just want to explain what he means by that, because it can be easily misunderstood. He's talking about how education enables me to show up as a subject, to experience myself as a subject in the world. That aside from qualification and aside from socialization, there is someone becoming in the world. And that is about appearance. That is about, he refers to natality. He refers to birth. It's in education, I am born. My parents may well have physically enabled me to be born, but education enables me to be born as an agent in a pluralistic world. I'll just say what I mean by that. I'm able to be born into a world that is different from me, but which I am inevitably engaged in. And it's through education that I know what it is to be me as subject in the world. This is what we might describe as, I sometimes describe as, this is where the soul, or where the soul is attended to in education. And what Biester makes, it makes an observation which I'm sure will resonate with us, is that often in educational policy and practice, we get caught up in attending to the domains of qualification and socialization, and we can often overlook, or in fact not even be aware, that the student is being born into the world through education. So of course we need pilots that know how to land a plane, and as well as, you know, take off. We need doctors that know what bit to pull out of me and all the rest of it. So this isn't about saying we shouldn't be competent. But what Biesta talks about is how in the drive for competence, and particularly where we get obsessed with the technical competence of teachers, what happens is they no longer know how to be wise. So we have competent teachers, but not wise teachers. And that technical competence is how we then tend to teach teachers in a product-orientated model of education. So for Biesta, he doesn't discount qualification socialization, but he knows that we have to talk up subjectification, because it's the first thing that gets jettisoned when we're thinking systematically about education. Now, I know I'm a bit on a soapbox here, so it may be difficult at the moment for you to butt in. So please, you know, do something with your arms if you're wanting to come in here, because I'm just about to make a more pertinent observation, which you'll pick up in my article. Nisha, cut in, go on, interrupt. Just before
I'm sitting with this thought that life itself creates the subjectification, right? It is one going through life that makes us into who we become, or what we are, our identity, our purpose, our involvement or engagement of who I am with what's around me. But what you're saying, Giles, is to make that our aim or objective of education.
Sorry, yeah, I just distracted there by a question coming in from Diane. I heard you say something there. I want to say something, Nisha, about, you said, oh, it's kind of just in life we pick this up. So what I'm suggesting, what Biesta suggests, is it's not just going through life. What happens, and this is crucial, and it comes on to encounter, what happens is that my life is interrupted. It is interrupted by the other. And it is through the interruption of the other that I am able to be born, if you like, into the world. Before the interruption, there is something complete about who I think I am. There's something complete about my world. And in a sense, to be fully alive in the world, I need it interrupted by the world. And I'm already talking about encounter here. I'm racing ahead here. I just want to pause for a moment. No, why not? Well, I won't bother pausing. So I'm using the word arrival. I used it at the beginning. And you've already touched on it, perhaps, when you were talking about those teachers, is that there are times when the teacher interrupts the life of the student. They often interrupt the life uninvited. There's some abruptness. For those of you, you know the word in English, arrival. You know, the idea of coming to a particular place. But you can see there's a play on the word here. It's a rival. That there is something about the teacher that quite intentionally has to rival how I thought the world was. The key here is being able to live in a world that is inherently different from me, and to learn or to discover that I can exist in that world anyway and well, as opposed to having a view that the world is there and I am the center of the world, and it's for me to consume, for me to acquire and possibly exploit. That is where my world is not interrupted, but where the world centers around me. And this is where you can, okay, I am all over the place now. I hope you're keeping up. I can barely keep up with this. So in that product orientated model, the emphasis is the kind of the entity, the agent that's served by it is the individual student. It becomes all about them, about their performance, about their knowledge, about their personal growth. It feeds the idea of the individual, of autonomy. So this is one of the concerns about product orientated, and particularly when it's reduced in its Western model, it becomes all about you. And so coming back to Nisha's interruption of me, it was a beautiful interruption because it enables me to emphasize it's not just about life. It's about the interruption of my life by others. And we as educators, if you like, rival the completeness I had in my mind. And the reason, in the article, the reason why I get quite agitated about this is, I'll be very frank here, you know, whoever's in the room, I'm going to say this anyway, is my concern is that the TA accreditation process has become too product orientated. And it mimics too much of a Western economic academic model and squeezes out the possibility for the world to exist. So that's my own kind of, I'm being upfront here. I have a political agenda here in terms of the TA. Look, you know, shoot me down. Okay. I'll just stop there for a moment and see if anyone else wants to come in with a comment or a question before we get into Encounter. Karen, yeah.
The piece that I'm thinking of, I absolutely agree with you, and I'm realizing why some pieces of work really inspire me and other pieces of work make me feel quite contracted. And I'm getting a sense around people almost need to be invited or maybe interrupted in asking for something different. You know, I've discussed recently with someone a piece of work they want me to do. And the first thing they want to know is what will they get and who's going to accredit it. And I'm going, that's not the point. And almost they don't know any other way yet. So maybe part of our role is to educate people in that initial engagement as to, you think you know what you want, but actually it's not what you want. And I guess there's a marketing thing, you know, people want to know what they'll get at the end and they're paying money for it. And, you know, we've got to balance that as well. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, Andrew.
I think actually what I noticed when you're talking about Biesta's 3 domains, what connected with me was Simon Sinek's work around golden circles. And what he was saying is that the outermost circle is talking about the what we do, then you move in saying how we do it, and then the why we do it. And the modern world is so stuck on what we do versus where true motivation comes from is when you know the why you do it. So looking at those 3 domains, the qualifications around the what, the socialization around the how, and then that subjectification or the being born is linking into the why.
The why, and I would want to just adapt it and it says the why and the who. The who.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you, in his work, we'll start with why, and then there's a companion book which is called Find Your Why. And there's a really engaging process in Find Your Why, which does get you to a place where you really own who you are, linking to what you want to do and why you want to do it.
Yeah, that rings true. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. If I just pick up on a couple of those comments there, and particularly Karen, what you were saying about expectations, is if I said at the beginning that this I was hoping would be a dialogue, and I know the nature of the conversation that I want to cultivate, but the meaning that you take from it is your business. And if my intention at the beginning was also not to drop into too much technique. It's picking up on what you were saying, Karen, in your writing about being an educator. And my intention is that we might become more thoughtful about how engaged I might be in a process or product orientated, outcome focused. When can I be less thoughtless and more thoughtful of what I'm choosing to do here, and how congruent that is? Because I know that a lot of people are really attracted by what I'm talking about, and then spend most of their time setting up arrangements which are still very outcome focused. And I don't underestimate the challenge in what I'm describing here. Because it really means that my expertise now is less important than my capacity to show up as I am with the student. And there is risk involved in this. I've just put the title of one of Biesta's books, The Beautiful Risk of Education. And this is really going to get into the business of encounter now, is that what Biesta notices, and what I think we will have all experienced, is that just because someone interrupts our life does not mean that I show up. And just because I know about this stuff and I train and teach with this in mind does not mean that the student is going to show up. We're not talking here about them, if you like, getting an idea or being able to perform a skill. I'm talking about whether or not that person and I have got the capacity to reveal myself. And I hasten to add, I'm talking about this happening. This isn't developmentally orientated. The moment I start talking about developmental stages, I'm back to that kind of process again. I'm saying that a 3-year-old can experience encounter. An 80-year-old can experience encounter. This isn't about how old you are. And some might argue actually that younger children are far more capable of revealing who they are to the world than we are. And so there's risk involved in this. There's disappointment, there is uncertainty, there is disruption, there is some degree of disintegration. So I don't want to idealize this as an idea. And the nature of encounter involves being summoned. And this is perhaps a different way of framing vocation. Sometimes when teachers or other professionals talk about vocation, they talk as if it comes from in here. But the idea of vocation, the vocative, it refers to being called, of being summoned, precisely not from in here. It is being summoned by the other. So when I was asking you to explore your that school experience with the teacher, it's like on the one hand we're identifying very quickly, the other, but I'm interested in what gets called out of us. And this is where we're positioning now the teacher and student dynamic in what I see more as homonomy. Is that I suddenly realize that I do not hold the whole world and my world in here. And that the interruption can be quite unpleasant and disruptive. But it draws attention to the fact that there is a world out there which I perhaps do not know and would not otherwise have known had this other person interrupted it. And this is where we're getting into the territory of encounter. By implication, it is unplanned, it is spontaneous. You can't have a curriculum on it. You can't timetable it for 12 o'clock on a Tuesday or whenever. There isn't a curriculum resource to go with it. There is, to some extent, only us. Not you, us. There's a we-ness in this. I realise this is a really, in some respects, maybe such a conceptual presentation here that people may well be kind of, I don't know, drifting or finding this difficult to connect with. So I just want to check out with how you're doing with this. I've got some thumbs up. I've got some, okay, yeah, go on.
I've got another quick thought. I wonder if pockets of encounter happen within more structured processes, or are they mutually exclusive? Or
no, I think I think this is lovely, Karen. Is that and this? This is the key word I've not really used yet. Oh my goodness! You see, Karen, I see this idea of encounter as a different way of framing freedom in education, because all of your stories, I suspect. No, not all, I don't know because I wasn't listening, but many of the stories will be of how I felt seen or called out by this other person. And I appeared differently than I ever had before in my life. And all of a sudden I caught how I could be in the world. That teacher probably thought they were on lesson 3 of syllabus 5 of lesson number 2, plenary discussion. And this is, I'm suggesting for us as teachers, there is a very different kind of freedom to be had out of encounter. It means I can hold on to the, if you like, the contractual reality of the context I'm working in, which is to encourage these children or these adults to, do X, Y, and Z. Knowing that at any point something gets encountered, that whilst I may feel somewhat kind of crammed in by the context, by the kind of process, freedom is still possible. It doesn't have to be either or. But what I've noticed is, as educators, we do need to know about encounter to have faith in that freedom. That is, I find, helpful. Yeah. Nisha, yeah.
When you say freedom, is it the same as permission?
Well, no, I don't think it is. I see what you're doing there around getting a TA idea in there. I have some reservation, Nisha, about thinking about permission, because the danger is the permission comes from the educator, and that puts me back into that position again, which I don't think is around counter. I do think there's something about physis, though. I think that's what gets revealed. There's, So I just want a word on physis, because, let me just, something about physis. For those of you that feel fairly new to TA, and maybe that's a new word for you, Byrne talked about physis. He says that I'm not too sure how people get well. I'm not too sure about what makes people happy, but it might have something to do with physis, which is he described it as the kind of desire, the desire to grow, the natural kind of spirit. It's what makes grass grow up through concrete. It's that desire to thrive. And often in Byrne's work and in the way we've talked about it in TA, physis seems to be described as it's in you. You have your physis, which may grow and express itself. It's kind of located in you. Physis is a classic a word that comes out of classical Greece. It comes from the work of Heraclitus, and Heraclitus uses physis to describe all that breathes life into anything. Okay, that physis is in that wind, it's in the way the grass moves, and that we are simply a manifestation of it. It doesn't belong to me. It appears through me. It appears through me right now as it is you looking at me. It is common to us. Heraclitus talks about physis as being mysterious because it is always itself concealed. It only appears in these expressions of life. Okay? So you don't have your physis, I don't have mine. We are expressions of the same. Byrne didn't quite understand that, or if he did, he doesn't use that way of explaining it. But when we go back to the idea, Nisha, I'm responding to what you're saying about permission. I find physis more useful for me to think about what's occurring in that educational moment. And it's something that exists almost outside of you and I. And I love those moments when I get that sense of there it is, there it is. And it's awesome. And it reduces us to tears, and yet it reduces us to tears, and yet we feel bigger than we have ever done. That there is something of of the beauty of the world that gets exposed. And this is the other piece is that this is about an experience in which I now encounter not just the other person, but the world. And this is a world that nurtures me. This is the world that enables me to breathe and to grow. This is a world that's full of colour and the multiplicity of growth. So this is not now the world of which I'm the centre and I can do with what I will. This is, and you can hear now, for those of you that were with me about a month ago when we were talking about EcoTA, you can hear, I'm just knocking on the door there of EcoTA. You can hear where I'm going now. It is that this is where I suddenly become aware that I'm not apart from the world, but I'm a part of it. And so, yes, I don't just encounter the educator. Because of the interruption of the educator, I'm also suddenly aware and alert to the world. So the educator brings, if you like, the world to me. Yeah, but not in any kind of literal sense. My goodness. My goodness. How we do it? Yeah, Avinda, is this a question coming up? Or just a happy wave?
Giles, as I hear you more and more, what I'm realizing is the encounter doesn't need to be a human or a person. It could be with the mountain, it could be with the tree, it could be with the river. So the educator as a human is not just it's just moving out for me. And also in a lot of things that I heard from you is also the industrialization of education. So these are the two things that I can the second bit about industrialization of education and how it impacts us, and the second bit about nature becoming the educator. I can remember the first time that I trekked the Himalayas when I was 12, and when I came in touch with the snow-capped mountains and how I felt, then that's an encounter of calm and peace, or whatever that I took away, and so that's an encounter.
I'm with you. I'm with you on both of those, and I just want to mention about the idea of landscape is that all education takes place in a place, and all of those places are on this single planet. And sometimes, yeah, that planet's enough. And so this is another contrast with the industrial model, where the emphasis is on complete this education, and somehow you will have a commodity. That education is about acquisition. And you can hear how that contrasts quite strongly with the idea that there is abundance. When we start to associate the educational act as one which joins me with a planet that is more than sufficient. So there's something about sufficiency and accumulation. There's something about autonomy and homonymy. And there is something there about appearing where, appearance as I am, as opposed to some sort of developmental, immature, mature process. So yeah, there are various points in which we want to contrast while still holding on to the fact that as educators, we can't hold either or. We still need people to be good dentists. So I'm not wanting to, I don't want to make this simple for us. Kirsty, yeah.
Jump in. So Di just put in the comments about the Netflix documentary, My Octopus Teacher, and I was going to mention that, Arvind, because it's about a diver who spends time with an octopus and how that teaches him about himself and life, and it just speaks to exactly what you were saying. The other thing is, can I put this in my own words and tell me if I'm understanding you? So when I, as an educator, show up as my real self, like I bring my inner essence, which is the same as your inner essence, out to the surface, I'm disrupting your current reality and almost peeling back the layers so that you recognize your own inner essence in me and now have the opportunity to move forward from that place. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes, it's just that last bit when you say move forward. Okay, I don't want to suggest that there's some kind of harmony. It's like you express the difference from me in the world, and your difference from me is crucial for me to figure out how to be in the world, even when it doesn't fit with how I want it to be. That's what being grown up, if you like. That's what being alive in the world is about. And so that's the only bit I would tinker with there, Kirsty, to emphasize that this isn't with a rush to make everything nice. This is about living with the diversity. So you can already hear there's another link going towards the sort of whole diversity and inclusion dimension now. It's why we need those key themes on the agenda, because it's only by, particularly as a white guy, it's so easy for me to live in a complete sense of the world and be utterly dead to the world's vitality. And so, so there's another kind of, so yes, what you were saying was, you've understood it in your own way, and that's more important, Kirsty.
Can I jump in here? A client said to me the other day that coaching for her is a contradictory point to reflect the patterns that are no longer serving her. And I think that's this thing, it's that encounter that through the contradiction and the interruption, something different becomes possible. Yeah. So for those of you on the Eco TA webinar I did, I think I may have mentioned about rite of passage. Now, I don't want to get too caught up in that, but what you can hear, I could hear there, Denise, is that there's a rupture
So there's a severance. I'm going to a period of threshold with the view to return. Yeah. Now, I need to take care here because I've just spoken at length about how education really ought not to have that trajectory going A to B. Oh, and the other thing I should have said, oh my goodness, the other reason why I have a reservation about that A to B is that point A is always regarded as less than point B. So what that can mean, and if I think in very, very practical terms here in the UK, I've worked in schools up in, say, the north of England, and the head teacher has been really clear that education is the escape from poverty, Giles. I want my kids to get their qualifications so they can go out into the world, they can leave this town and make something of themselves. And my challenge back is, and how does that leave the town? It's like educator becomes Pied Piper in that they steal away, they seduce the resource from the land that was good enough to bear them. And so if I do have a kind of a trajectory in my mind for education, is that if anything, I don't want to be pushed too hard on this, but I'm kind of happy to say this, that through the encounter, we might start to create an education that is formed around renewal. It is through the encounter that I renew the world. I don't raid it, I renew it. And it's how the world continues to thrive. Education is linked to the sustainability of the human race. Yeah, and that's why natality is is such an important idea. The metaphor of birth is so important in this discussion. I've often thought, and again, it's a bit political. In the UK we have the NHS. It's a service that's free of charge at the point of use, and in a sense, healthcare has always been orientated around the existential fact of our mortality. Doctors, nurses, and so on are there to really help us manage our relationship with mortality, and arguably that's why it should be free. Equally, education enables us to navigate our natality, the fact of our being born into the world. Arguably that's why it should be free. You shouldn't be charging, you shouldn't be commodifying the key points of our existential experience. But that is just totally over there. Forget I even said that. That's illegal to be able to say that. So
Can't forget it. That is beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
Absolutely beautiful. I can't forget that you said that. Refuse.
But my goodness, look, it's 10 to 11. We're packing up. We're packing up soon. And
Can I put in one simple bit of TA into all of this?
Yeah, that would be helpful, I think, Diane.
Because particularly when you were talking, Karen, about how, you asked to go and do X and people, and then you said, Giles, we need dentists. So there are particular things we have to do at that level of qualification. But for me, what's essential and what determines the outcome of every transaction, as we know, is the psychological level. Now, if at that psychological level we are open for encounter, we are open for freedom, we are open for birth, or whatever, that is what's going to be the outcome of whatever we're doing at the social level. I thought.
Well, yeah, and Diane, I think going back to my little political thing about TA, I would like to see us use exactly that language in our training manual. When did you encounter in your work as a therapist? how do you prepare and think about encounter in planning your training program? Can you explain your tape for your exam in the language of encounter? Birth. Yeah. I don't want this stuff hidden anymore, I suppose. And I think, yeah, I mean, I just see that. I think you're right. I think that I think Byrne is equating vital energy with physis. That's my take on it. I just don't think he wrote enough about it. I personally don't know that he was as interested in that as he was in the process of cure and healing. And I don't, you know, that's not really a criticism. I think, like many people involved in medical care, they're exposed to sick people. I don't think educators are. And so, you know, our language frame might be different at times. Folks, I am mindful of the time. We've got about 10 minutes. So, yeah, I want to give you the opportunity. I just, maybe, yeah, maybe Alex, if it's okay, just to drop us back into, for a 5-minute breakout group, just to share with 1 or 2 people before we come back for the last 5 minutes. Is that okay, folks? Just to take stock.
The same rooms or mix it up?
Yeah, okay, if they're there. Yeah, why not? That's probably neater, yeah. Just 5 minutes, folks, to just say, what do you reckon? How's that connected with you? And does it resonate, you know, maybe with that earlier reflection?
Okay, so I'm going to mix up the rooms and open them up.
Yeah, maybe that will change too over the years. We'll see. Okay. Oh my goodness, we're back. Okay. So I'm really mindful about time, and that you're in different parts of your day. So I don't want to take liberties with it, but just wondered, in terms of checking out, whether or not there's anything that you want to kind of, you feel as though you want to share before we close today, in terms of what's been uppermost for you here. Thanks. Yeah, Sharon.
Yes, for me, it was wonderful to see how you actually lived what you were talking about in terms of interrupting my thought processes or the way in which I do things. And that was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Damn it, you spotted it. I thought it was so clever.
Well, you are. Doesn't mean we're not as well.
Touche, Sharon. Beautifully put.
God, she's good. Yeah, anybody else with any clever comments to make? Anybody else?
Okay.
Yeah, Dragana, sorry, I didn't see you. Go on, yeah.
Sorry, I have a big interruption with my electricity, but I have still have energy. it's like addiction through curiosity, you know. You invite my curiosity, and I connect with this. But I'm thinking, I have a question about, or some reflection about how it's very important to be very well grounded through this when you're doing this process. And I'm thinking about the risks, especially when we work in a special sensitive environment like multicultural environment, and those things that I always have a strong feeling that we have to be very sensitive about this, and your passion is so full. And I'm just thinking about the risks. What is the risky, how its energy level is going through this process. And maybe I have a question for you, something about boundaries and personal
My goodness, Dragana, I mean, that really is, that's really like the next workshop, isn't it? It's about when you do want to work in this territory, how do you ground yourself? How do you ground yourself whilst at the same time instigating uncertainty? It's a paradox there, isn't it?
Yes.
And in fact, Palmer's quite good on paradox. If you look at my handout, there's a list of 7 or 8 paradoxes that he talks about, in which, you know, we want a room in which the big stories, the big disciplines of knowledge and understanding can be held, but also the small personal stories can be heard. We need spaces that are hospitable, but charged. Hospitable and charged. We don't want them marshmallowy. We want stuff to happen that's disruptive. But we also want people to have a sense of welcome, but not too comfortable. We need a space where voices fill the room, but there's also space for silence, quietness. We want a space which the collective can gather, and yet the individual can get a sense that they've not been lost. So these are some of the paradoxes, and the reason why I mention it is in relation to Dragana's question about, you know, what does boundary mean? What does ethical practice mean? You know, I'm mindful there of Sue Eusden, brilliant TAJ article on ethical managing ethics when you're right at the edge of your practice. So if this kind of education is most transformational when it's at its most risky, how do you manage ethical concerns there? In a culture which is saying we should make things safe. So I think that's another workshop, Karen. Put it on the list.
I think so. I'm hearing that. Brilliant.
I need to say goodbye. I need to say goodbye. I vote for the next workshop. And many, many thanks.
Thank you.
I need to leave promptly. Bye.
Bye, guys. Kirsty, will you say a few words of thanks to Giles as part of the executive team of the SATA?
Yeah, well, on behalf of all of us, thank you so much, Giles, for this 2-hour-long encounter, which has been incredibly informative and special for me personally, and I'm sure for everybody else here. We really appreciate you giving your time so generously to us, and always for showing up so passionately and just real. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kirsten, and thanks for all of you for hanging around with me this Wednesday morning. Thank you. Okay.
Great.
Thank you so much, Giles.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.